So, um, so, just so you guys know, there is a chat box. If you have questions, you can type your questions into the chat, and I will see those and we will moderate those for the panelists today. So, we're going to go through a couple of presentations and we'll try. And if there's big questions, we'll get those kind of as we go, but we'll save most of them till the end and allow Eric and Rachel to both comment. And then we also have Mandy Parks with us today for a little bit. She is the member at large and in the Pacific region for the National Conservation District Employees Association. So we welcome her. So we're excited to have Rachel Pettit. She is with the Southern California Soil and Water Hub. And Eric Scheidler, who is a district manager with the Vermilion County Soil and Water Conservation District, with us presenting. Eric is also on the National Employees Association. He is the money man. He handles all of our funds as the treasurer. So, with that, Rachel, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you get going.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to walk us through a presentation about grants and alternative funding strategies, but really at any point, if you have questions or comments or feedback, please use that chat and we can have this be a dynamic discussion. There's going to be several points throughout the presentation where I'm posing questions to you and you can kind of think of it as a poll. You can respond in the chat and then we'll have a better idea of who's in the room and where we're at with our funding. So I will share the presentation now. Okay, so as Sarah mentioned, I'm Rachel Pettit, and I'm the Southern California Soil and Water Hub Coordinator. And that hub is a collaboration between 6 resource conservation districts around Southern California that have partnered together to cross district lines and watersheds to work collaboratively on promoting climate smart agriculture practices in our districts. So today we're going to talk about some of the prep work for grant writing and fundraising, because really so much of the work happens ahead of the grant request for proposal. We're going to talk about how to find those opportunities and assess your eligibility, where and when to collaborate. We're going to hear from Eric, a success story, and at the end there will be more time for questions and discussion. And really this is a brainstorming session so that we can collaboratively think of alternative ways to raise funds. So first, I wanted to get a sense of, we have about 70 people in the room here. So if you could just type your district and what state you're in the chat box there. And then throughout the presentation, if you're looking through that chat and you see other folks in your state that maybe you have or haven't connected with, feel free to direct message each other, exchange contact info. We'll get a sense of who across the country is here today. So the very first thing is to know what you're looking for when you are going after some funding. So the best place to start is with strategic planning, which happens well in advance of an RFP. Strategic planning can be done with your board of directors, hopefully with staff engagement and with other key stakeholders in your constituency. Ideally every 5 years or even more frequent if you really have the time and ambition for that. And during that process, you can be asking yourself, what's in your wheelhouse? What programs are already on your menu of services? Are you focused on irrigation efficiency or pollinator habitat? What's the main menu of practices that your conservation district already focuses on? And how does that align with your mission and your overarching vision statement? Does the request for proposal for this particular funding opportunity match with what you're already offering and what your overarching mission is? Then it's good to ask yourself some questions about who your demographic is. What type of producers and landowners are you working with? Is there a particular demographic? Like here in San Diego County, we have the highest concentration of veterans, military veterans in our county, and we also have the highest concentration of women-owned farmers. So those are 2 really important demographics in our district, and when we're looking at funding, we want to make sure that a lot of the funding will meet their needs. And it also opens up access to funding that's particularly designated for those groups. Another important question to ask is, based on this grant or funding opportunity, will you need to build capacity to meet the goals? Do you currently have enough staff and resources to meet all of the grant deliverables, or will there be some capacity building element, and how to plan for that? And then, of course, we've probably already all seen the SMART goals, but here we've added it so it's a Smartie, like that chalky little candy that we all love. And the Smartie goal is what guides you in making those goals for your strategic plan, but also making the goals when you're writing a grant proposal, and really keeping it grounded, because it can be easy to dream really big, which is exciting, but you want these goals tied to an actual timeline, and you want them to be achievable, measurable, very specific. So that's just a general guide to keep in mind. If you could
Rachel,
use
I'm
the
going to
chat.
interrupt just
Oh yeah,
real quick.
sure.
So the chat is disabled in this webinar, folks. So if you go to the more on the bottom of your screen, if you just see the chat, there is an option for a Q&A box that you can open up, and that will allow you to chat with folks. You can send in your questions. So, we've had a few folks type in there from Ohio and New Jersey and Montana, Washington, Indiana. So feel free to use that. That way we can kind of keep everything in one spot for our panelists so I don't lose anything. Really, it's for me because I'm not good at multitasking. So
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Yeah. So everyone just click over to that Q&A and feel free to put your conservation district name, and then in that same message, what state, because often we have very geographic specific names, and it's it's hard to know where in the country you are. And also, if you want to type in anything, any comments you have there, does your district have a strategic plan? How often is that strategic plan updated? And if you have more in-depth commentary or questions on strategic plan writing or development, we can save those for the end as well. This is just one example. We're going to talk about collaboration a lot throughout our hour today. And one example of regional collaboration is this soil and water hub that I mentioned earlier. Mandy from the Inland Empire RCD and 5 other district managers got together to create, you'll see at the very bottom of the map here, we're in that light orange, that's the Southern California soil and water hub region. And then there are 6 other hubs that have formed around the state of California, and they have varying numbers of districts collaborating together. One of the hubs has 17 different conservation districts in it, one has 4. So these are just ways that we've organized ourselves around such a large state so that we can address regional needs. And then often there's opportunities throughout the year for the hub coordinators, such as myself, to get together and work on a statewide perspective, often going to Sacramento to impact policy change and to collaborate on what the regional needs are and how that impacts statewide funding, what trends we're seeing in agriculture across the state, things like that. One great advantage of this model is that it's increased the technical assistance and resource sharing across districts. Some of our districts have 0 employees and they're volunteer run. Others have 20 to 30 employees. So by collaborating together across the district lines, we're able to share staff, share capacity, share knowledge, increase our outreach efforts, impact policy on a larger scale. And this has really furthered our climate beneficial ag programs. And lastly, one of the goals is to assist the state of California in meeting the carbon neutrality goals that have been set, and those have funding associated with them. All right, collaboration, as I mentioned, there's a lot of different opportunities for collaboration. Organizing regionally within your state with neighboring districts is one great way. And one way to do that is with shared staff. Mandy, actually, I'm wondering if I could pick on you to share a little bit about the example that we have here in Southern California, where 2 districts, the Inland Empire and Coachella Valley, have collaborated to share staff. And Mandy, if you don't mind, could I put you on the spot just to share a few minutes about what that looks like?
Everyone knows what a great speaker I am. I'm thrilled to share. I'm just kidding. No, we have a wonderful partnership. It's our district immediately adjacent to us that was in need of farmer outreach help. They had a really limited NRCS presence in their office, and we had kind of the same situation, and we wanted to step into hiring somebody, but weren't exactly sure how that was going to look, how training would look, how we would be interacting with NRCS, and we ended up executing a staff sharing agreement and looking for grant money, and ended up getting a technical assistance grant from the National Association of Conservation Districts. Using that money, we hired somebody who is able to provide the very specific kind of outreach we need here. We have a lot of Spanish-speaking farmers in our shared service area with Coachella Valley. So it's really, really important that the person hired, she actually didn't have a big background in ag. She more had an outreach background, fully bilingual in spoken and written Spanish, is a really engaging person. So we hired her. Both offices worked on training with her. And then she was able to provide, IERCD actually did the hiring. So my district hired her. And then through our staff sharing agreement, she's able to also work in Coachella Valley service area. And then we just invoice Coachella Valley for half of her time. And she's able to provide, really core service supporting NRCS in both of our service areas. And then we can share training. We can, she's got a lot of NRCS resources in both offices to help her keep learning and really working effectively with them. I think the most important thing about that particular partnership is just defining roles. When you are sharing an employee, she's our employee. And so it was just, important just for everybody's kind of edification to understand, where she's getting her paycheck, what she would be doing in the neighboring district, all that. But outside of that staff sharing agreement, allowing individual staff members to work in adjacent districts is a really incredible solution. If you're not sure you need a full-time, if you have an adjacent district with a similar need, it's a really incredible way to meet that need.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. Yeah, that's been a great example on the ground here. Other ways to think about collaboration is to talk and chat with the neighboring districts and find out what grant opportunities have been the most impactful for them and see if those align with you. Could you go after that grant together, which could make your application more attractive and really amplify the effect of the dollars? Are there grants that others have been interested in, but no one's quite pulled the trigger on because it's such a daunting application, and maybe that's a great place for opportunity? Could you collaborate to contract out a grant writer? Maybe that would be a good use of funds, where districts put up the funding together to find a dedicated grant writer, even part-time on contract, and they're going after collaborative or individual grants for you all. There's a lot of ideas there. So if you're seeing someone in the chat that's in your state and this seems of interest, you can get the ball rolling on these conversations. Another way to think about collaboration in terms of fundraising is thinking about the obvious partners and the unlikely partners. And that's partners to contract with, to go after a grant with, to ask for funding from, all kinds of partnerships. So an obvious partner is who's already working in the arena, who's working with your constituency and your demographic. Is NRCS a very large presence in your region, or is it not? Is there a nonprofit or private sector organization that's doing a lot of the conservation work with the producers in your region that you want a stronger relationship with, and how can you focus on that? And then to brainstorm some unlikely partnerships. Is there a university or even a community college, a 2-year program that has an ag department or a conservation or botany, or is somehow could be involved in your arena? Is there private sector or industry partners that you'd like to engage with more? One way that I look at this in San Diego is a very unlikely partner, but someone that I think has a great fit with conservation districts, is the hotel industry. The hospitality industry in San Diego is huge. There are lots of large hotels and they overlook our oceans and our river waterways and the fringe of urban and working lands. A lot of our farms are right backed up into urban areas. And so how can we engage the hospitality industry in conservation efforts to protect their view and their the attractiveness of their hotel and location, the natural beauty around San Diego, including the working lands, the natural and working lands. So partnering with a hotel might seem like a very unlikely partnership, but when you are able to tell the story and make the connections with them, you can tap into an alternative funding source that may not seem obvious at first. And that can look a lot of ways. Maybe that if it's a big mainstream hotel, maybe they have a foundation or some sort of charitable program that you can tap into that way. Or maybe you need to create the program a little bit through conversations. Maybe that looks like point of sale marketing, where at the registration desk, people checking in can learn about the local conservation district. They can join you for a tour, or if there's an agritourism opportunity that the hotel advertises there at the desk, if someone could round up their hotel bill to add an extra percentage for conservation efforts in the area of the location that they're on vacation for, things like that. Just really thinking outside the box. And in your region, there might be a very specific industry that doesn't seem like a natural fit for a conservation district, but maybe we can, through some creative thinking and storytelling, create those ties. And lastly, I just want to say to connect with your NCDEA regional rep. That's the link there. If you're not familiar with who your rep is, go check out the site and get to know that person, because they've got a lot of more local resources for you. I'm curious if anyone out here has shared staff with another district or NRCS office. If you could give a thumbs up or type in the chat what has been your experience with shared staff. Is it something you're already doing? How many? Or is it something you're interested in? Have there been any specific blocks? We can hear the questions and troubleshoot that at the end. So we've touched on this a little bit, but kind of the big question in the air is government grants versus private funding. There's a lot of federal and state grant opportunities, and quite a few of those are up in the air right now. And so thinking of alternative funding strategies like accessing private funding through foundations, philanthropists, and corporate sponsorship is becoming increasingly important. Many soil conservation districts have set up 501c3 foundations as their counterpart to make it a little bit easier to accept private donations. I'm curious if that's something you're interested in or already doing. So another way to think of this is, what are those top private industries? If you could type in the chat or maybe unmute yourself, but let's hear, like, what are those industries? Here in San Diego, I talked about hospitality. Also, there's a huge beverage industry. So companies that are brewing beer and hard kombucha. There's wineries. And those folks are coming out with new flavors and looking for local fresh produce. So we can make some obvious connections there where we're opening new market channels for our producers. But in doing so and making that connection with that company, we're letting them know what a conservation district is, what our needs are, and then that creates a natural ask for what our funding needs are right there with the private sector. So I'm curious what that could look like in your area. Just starting those conversations, introducing them to producers to maybe fulfill a need, and then you're in the door and you're relationship building with them. Some other places to look for grants. I've got the links here. Council on Foundations is a whole catalog of private foundations, and you can use the search box to search by what your priority is. When we go back to that strategic planning conversation, what are the programs that you're already offering? What needs are you meeting in your region? And coming up with keywords out of that menu, and then looking through like a catalog of foundations to see who is a good fit for funding that particular need. Some general tips, especially when applying for a government grant, there's often informational sessions, webinars held prior to the RFP. It's really important to watch those so that you know more about what the application process and eligibility requirements will be. It's also a great way to learn about the grant manager and introduce yourself and start relationship building there. Another way would be to talk to other folks who have applied for and successfully received those grants. For government grants, you can be asking around in your network, but for private foundations, they often put the stories of their previous recipients from the previous year right there on the website. So when you're looking at a foundation, looking through their website, reading the stories, seeing the pictures, hearing about what past recipients were chosen, what did they do with the funds, is there any overlap with the work that you're doing, and how do you highlight that? Make a list of those keywords to search, even if it's just a Google search, but really when you're going through the foundation catalogs and databases, it's good to have a short list of the keywords that overlap the most with the work that you're doing. You can even generate like a word cloud in your strategic planning session where you there's a lot of free programs online to just see what words are coming up the most often in your strategic planning, in your conversations, in your meetings, and in your grant applications, in surveys of your producers or your constituency. Is it soil, water, pollinator work, first generation farmers, veteran farmers? What are those words that are coming up? And that can guide your funding search. How does this funding opportunity fit into that larger strategic plan? Is there overlap with the work already being done? Or is this going to be a whole new menu of services that you're adding on? And do you have the capacity for that? And lastly, based on your current org chart, and if you don't have one yet, it's time to update. Who is in your conservation district? What are their roles? What are the roles needed for this new grant opportunity? And where is there a gap that needs to be filled? Perhaps the org chart needs to be updated, or maybe that's where the capacity building comes in. I think I'm going to turn it over to Eric now, unless Sarah, if you want to pause for questions here, or we could let Eric dive right in. But yeah.
I think we can let Eric dive in. We've just had some comments about there are some districts out there that have had shared staff that work really well. Some of them have been like, it seems like a project that they shared staff on, or in the past, through different funding sources, have shared employees. So I think that's a fantastic idea. Some questions on like the foundation and setting up the 501c3. I would just say with that, every district is so different in how they're organized under their state statute that you really want to make sure that you look at your organization, if you're able to do it, and work with your governing body, whether that's your like your state conservation committee or state soil conservation organization, whatever that looks like in your state, to work through that process to see if it's possible for you. Because while it's definitely possible in some states, in others it is not. So you want to make sure that you are looking into that in your own states. So yeah, great.
All right. Well, I guess I'll jump in. Just to piggyback on what Sarah said, just real quick, as a kind of a follow-up in districts looking at becoming their own 501c3. You might also check if your local community has already established a community foundation. A lot of times those entities will work with you. They have the opportunity to do, when they're handling smaller amounts of money, they'll do more like what's called a pass-through fund, where they're just the holder of the money. So, you know, your grant benefactor sends them the money, they'll hold it for you, and then as you need it, you request it from them. And sometimes that comes with a minimal administrative fee, sometimes not. It just depends on the community foundation and your relationship with those folks. So I would definitely, if that's something that you're, as a district, you're looking at, check there first and have that conversation with your community foundation, because they may be able to handle those funds for you, and you know, be willing to do that for little to no money. We've done that personally in our district for several years. We had a pass-through account that, you know, it only held less than $10,000, but it was just there for us to have funds available outside of the purview. Don't know if I should say this, but you know, there at one point in time we couldn't pay for food or dinners or things like that at field days and events. So we had this pot of money over here held with the community foundation. We could pay for those things. Those have relaxed over the several years in our state law, and we don't necessarily need that now. But that was what we used that for at that certain point in time. So lots of opportunities with your community foundations. So I've been here at Vermilion County in Indiana for 11 years, and we've had some relatively good success with getting grants, really of all sizes. But I'm going to focus on, a couple of, for those of you out there that are just new into getting into the grant world, or really haven't, taken that step to write grants and things like that. It can be overwhelming. It can be intimidating. But really, once you start with some of these smaller ones and get into that process and understand how it works, going after the larger grants really, aren't bad at all. I did notice in one of the Q&As, somebody asked what an RFP was. Again, in our acronym world, request for proposal is what RFP. And I put that in the Q&A. I didn't answer that, but just so everybody, in case you didn't see that, request for proposals. Sometimes that is just simply letting everybody know that the application period is open for a particular funder. Sometimes those RFPs are actually like a pre-application. And so what the grantors want to see is they want to see your idea, your concept, and then they'll look at that and say, okay, does that match up with our mission, our objectives, whatever they have going on? And then they'll actually invite you to formally apply. So when we talk about RFPs, there's a couple of different scenarios that those RFPs come into play. So just, really read through the grant application guidelines and instructions. That's going to be, the very first thing that you're going to want to do. And that they should normally provide you with the details, because most of these folks have been doing these grants for a long time. If those guidelines seem confusing, do not hesitate to reach out. Usually there's an email of somebody to contact. Ask your questions. That's what those are there for. If something needs clarified, don't hesitate to ask. It's not going to hurt your chances. They're not keeping notes. And, when your application comes through, they're like, oh no, they asked too many questions. We don't want them. Don't hesitate to ask the questions. But look at some of those smaller grants, and really those smaller grants are going to come probably from somebody close to home. Again, I go back to the community foundation. We're currently under now 2 grants with our community foundation, both for $2,500. So these small grants that are helping us pay for a program that we really didn't have all the money for, and we needed a little bit of help. They're there, easy process. We've established that relationship already. But those are the ones that are really good to cut your teeth on, as far as the application goes, because they tend to be a little easier application, to fill out. And it really just depends on who the funder is. One of the things that I like to do is I have several shovel-ready projects, ideas that we've come up with, that we've pretty well vetted out how it's going to look. And they're sitting there. They're kind of on a shelf. And then when a funding opportunity comes along, we're like, that fits. And then we've got an idea ready to go. And we can basically just take that idea out and plug it in. So you may not have any funding opportunities right now, but it is never too late to start thinking about, what would we like to do? What programs do we want to expand? What, new programs do we want to bring in? We just put a building up, a small portable building up at our fairgrounds. That took some time. That took some planning, and we had to wait for a funding source to come through or come along that would fit that. But again, we kind of had that sitting on the shelf. This is what we want, and this is how we want it to look. And when that time is right, you can pull it off the shelf, plug it in, and then start going after that money. Some people will look for grants and then figure out, okay, now what can we do to get that money? I'm of the belief, have your ideas ready. And then when those funding sources come along, you're ready to go. You pull it off the shelf and you put it in the application. Just some things to think about as you're looking at diving into this grant world. So like I said, we've had a couple of opportunities with some smaller grants, one with our community foundation here locally. The other one, we were a Friend of NACD grant recipient this year. Again, very easy, highly competitive. So this is where that having the idea kind of pre-vetted and ready to go, you can pull it off the shelf. And that's what that one was. That was part of this education building, watershed hub education building that we're putting in. We just, we needed little extra money, a little extra funder. So we put that in there. So that was one of those shovel ready projects that we were able to plug in, and we were ready to go. And it's very, very easy applications. And then on the reporting side, I did want to touch a little bit on the reporting side, because some people, what's the reporting going to be like, or how much? And so really the reporting is going to be very funder dependent. And I'm going to share my screen just real quick and show you a couple of examples. So the first one that I'm going to show you is the community foundation that we work with. We have some reporting to do. Again, this is a $2,500 grant that we received, and their reporting is not really in depth, but it is fairly detailed. I mean, they want to ask, some good questions. They want some good feedback on what you're doing with the money that they provided you. And so I'm not going to read through all of these questions, but this just kind of gives you an idea of what some of these reporting and your outcome reporting might look like. They want to know, how are you, where are you in your goals and objectives? As Rachel put on her very first slide, looking at, are your goals measurable? And so some of your funders are going to want to know. They're going to want to know measurable details. How many people has your project influenced, or how many students have you reached in this program, or whatever it is. They want to know, and they want to be able to track numbers. So again, going back to what Rachel said, having measurable goals and measurable outcomes. So then when the reporting comes in, you have that data ready to go, because probably somebody's going to want to know that information. Were there any variances from when you originally applied to now? Again, those things happen too, and that's okay. Most, if not all, funders understand that, where we were when we applied to where we are now, things change, circumstances change. Just keep them informed, let them know. As long as you're not totally deviating from the scope of what your original intent was, it's okay if things change. So just communicate. Again, let folks know what's going on, and they're happy about that. Attainment of goal. This one, attainment of goals, lessons learned. They're kind of wanting to know what did you learn through this process. These are really good questions just to ask yourself after you've completed a grant, just for your own reflection. And what did we learn through this grant? What can we take into doing the next grant, the bigger grant, things like that. Again, another question on measuring effectiveness. A lot of grants will want to know, how are you going to sustain this past the grant period? Is this a one and done type of thing, or is there going to be some longevity? And if there is, how are you going to continue to fund it? So you do need to kind of have that after grant plan into how you're going to sustain whatever it is that you're doing past what this grant's going to fund. Again, some things to think about as you're developing those key goals. they're always going to ask how you spending the money. How are you looking on your budget? How is this project being marketed? How are you including those folks in your marketing materials as a funder? Some want that, and some prefer to remain anonymous. Just depends on the funder. Most of them don't mind seeing their name tacked on some publicity. There's various ways that you can do that to satisfy that request. I'm just a big proponent of, if they're going to give me money, I'll plaster their name wherever they want it, because I'm grateful that they're going to provide us some support and some funding. So lots of different ways that you can thank and promote those funders. There's several questions for a $2,500 grant, not hard questions, but that takes a few minutes to fill out. And then here, this is the NACD Friends of Conservation or Friends of NACD grant. Again, $2,500, same amount of money. And it was just a form stack. You answered like 5 or 6 questions. Just very basic. So again, whoever the funder is and how they want you to report success or report is going to be varied depending on who it is. And I bring that in just to show it's not a cookie cutter. Be prepared to answer some in-depth questions, or just be prepared to say, this is what we've done, this is how much we've spent, thanks. So it all depends on the funding and the funder. I'm going to say something that might be a little taboo, and yep, Sarah just perked up when I said that. That always makes her nervous when I say that. And it depends on your theory on this. I use AI. I'll be honest. ChatGPT has helped me write some sections of applications. Some people might scoff at that and be like, "Oh, listen." And I'm not the greatest of writers, so I use it. I get the idea. I do all that work myself, and then I plug it into there, and I say, "Clean this up," or I give. You can copy and paste in, whatever the heading guideline is, and say, okay, help me polish this up. Don't be afraid to use those tools. They're there. Don't have it write it for you, but take what you're wanting to do and put it into those AI tools. They just help you clean it up. And then proofread it. Whatever you put into those engines, proofread them when they come out and make sure that they make sense. But, especially in highly competitive grants, you need every edge that you can get. Utilize those tools. It's not against the law. If they're there, use them. And if it sets you apart a couple of notches from your other competitors and you get the grant, it worked for you. Understand you're going to get told no. You're going to put a lot of hard work into some of these grants, and you're not going to get them, and that's part of the game. So just understand it's not necessarily that it's a bad idea. It's not necessarily that your writing was poor. Sometimes there's just a lot of good ideas, and it comes down to very minute things. I know I've been told no more than I've been told yes. You just got to keep trying, keep putting those applications in. They'll pan out eventually. So just, and again, work on those local funders, work on those local opportunities. Those are the ones that you can develop relationships with those people specifically. National funders are great. Big pots of money, but going after those local dollars, working with those local groups, whether it's an energy provider that has a foundation, or some sort of local industry that has a foundation, talk with those people, and don't be afraid to have conversations and just asking, what kind of things are you looking for? Outside of the grant period, just, call them up or email them, go out for lunch and just ask those questions. What kind of projects are you looking for? What does your company want to center on? And then start to develop, okay, where does that fit in with our goals, our mission, and things like that? So I can't stress enough, when you get into the process, communication is key, asking questions, giving good factual reporting back, and then developing relationships with local funders will, increase your success odds greatly. So hopefully that was something that was helpful. And if there's any questions that anybody has, take those now, or we can wait till here in a little bit.
No, if there's questions, please type them into the Q&A box. A couple things I really loved, Eric and Rachel, both that you touched on, kind of thinking outside the box a little bit. I think in the present environment, a lot of us have fallen, into the situation of having all of our eggs in one funding basket. And that is never a good way to go. And so I love kind of thinking a little bit more, outside the box, broad terms, industry. Rachel, I love that you mentioned, hotels and tourism, and kind of talking to some of those people on how you can work together. And maybe it's not grants or funding, but maybe it's a partnership on a project, or, there's so many things out there. So I love looking at those kind of different options that are out there. And I love, and maybe Eric, you can talk a little bit more about this. I think that a lot of us fall into the trap of looking for money without a project, right? We're like, oh, could we think of something that fits in this? So what is your kind of, talk us through your process a little bit for, like, how do you come up with projects with your team in your district and kind of put those all together to have them?
Well, I think a lot of it goes back to what Rachel said too, with strategic planning. So if you're not strategic planning as a board, and as a district, I would highly encourage you to do that. And that can be just as simple as getting the board together in a non-board meeting time where you can focus on it. And it's just really brainstorming, where are we now and where do we want to be? What do we want to offer our community that's different from what we're doing now? Or how do we strengthen what we're doing now? And through those discussions, then you start to get an idea or a sense of, where do we need extra funding and what projects would we like to implement or see done, that we can develop and again, have shovel ready sitting on that shelf. And then as funds come along, then, we're ready to put those in. I also steal a lot of stuff from other districts. I am notoriously friending other conservation districts on social media solely so I can look and see what programs they're doing or what things they've got going on to generate ideas on what can I be offering that I'm not thinking of, because I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the great ideas. There are much smarter people out there than me that have some really wonderful programs. And so I steal a lot of ideas from other folks. And then I make them fit here. And again, don't be afraid to reach out, to, and I've done it lots of times. I've called up districts in other states and I said, listen, I saw your program on social media. It really hit home with me. Can you tell me about it? How did you get it started? And I would say more times than not, I don't think I've ever had anybody say, no, I'm not going to explain it to you. Most people are like, wow, you saw that, and they're flattered that you're asking about it. And so, it goes back to that collaboration. It may just be stealing somebody's idea and say, hey, that's a great idea. I would love to make that work here. How do I do it? So, those plans come from a lot of different directions in a lot of different ways. And if you're really serious about, promoting your district and getting out and doing, new things, sometimes we get stuck in that rut of, we've done the same program for 35 years and why change it? It's worked. Those are great. Those are staples. But is there a demographic? Is there a group of folks in your community, in your district that you're not reaching, and what can you be doing to maybe open that, open your doors to them too, and expand your reach and who you are. So those ideas come from a lot of different ways. You just have to be kind of open to accepting those ideas, and then, willing to do a little legwork to make those ideas happen. But that's kind of where we get a lot of our ideas, and then we sit down, we have a discussion with staff, and talk about what would this look like. Have a discussion with our board. Are you cool that we pursue this? Is this something that fits? And then talk about how do we go after the money, as those opportunities arise. I will make another comment too on kind of unique partners. We also have a really good relationship with economic development in our county, and they also have their ears and eyes open to funding potentials. They may have some money too that they can help with some projects, but they also know of funding sources. So if you have economic development in your district, in your county, get to know that person, that economic development director, and just share your ideas and say, hey, if you hear anything that comes across your table, let us know. And again, normally when you have those communications with those folks, they're very open to and willing to helping out, find dollars for your project.
I love that. I think it's really great to sign up for those listservs too. Like if you're economic development, like I'm in North Dakota, our state has one, and they send out a monthly newsletter that has lots of funding options in it. Our community foundation has the same type of thing. So if you see those and you think, oh, that's not really related to conservation, sign up anyway, because there's a lot of great information that comes out through those email lists, and you may find a funding opportunity that you might not have thought of previously, but that you qualify for. Rachel, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe demystify a little bit of the strategic planning. I saw in the chat some folks don't have strategic plans yet, and I just want everyone to walk away feeling empowered and encouraged and not overwhelmed by these things. So just, what one person calls strategic planning, someone else might already be doing, and they didn't call it that. But like Eric mentioned, a lot of it is just getting the right people in the room and brainstorming and writing down the ideas and writing down what your observations are on the ground. What are the biggest barriers for your producers in the area? What are the biggest threats to conservation in your area? A lot of us grew up in the districts that we're working in. All of us eat from the districts we're working in. We're the boots on the ground, and we know best. We are the people that should be in the room during these brainstorming sessions. So getting together with staff, board members, or the producers and partners in your area, and just kind of having that brainstorming discussion where you're collectively coming up with what are the biggest challenges. It's easy to come up with a list of problems, and then from there you get to problem solve and think of what would the solutions to those problems be. And the last step is, where do we find funding for that? Because really you want to be clear on what are we trying to accomplish, how do we want to accomplish it, and then the funding comes last. And that's kind of why, even though this is a grant writing webinar, we did focus so much on that prep work and the brainstorming and thinking outside the box, because from there you could go to the folks that could solve that problem with you, and they might not have a request for proposal or a funding opportunity out, but that's where we get creative and a little scrappy, and we get ourselves in front of those folks and have the conversation and really invite them in to participate in the conversation and build the solution together. Some of that could be as easy as doing a little bit of outreach or public education using social media or in person, maybe going to the farmers market and having a booth where you're talking about what your district does in the area and who you work with. Or maybe you don't have the human power to sit at a booth, so you go to the market for half an hour and you just pass out flyers. Maybe you go to a beach cleanup if you're a coastal place, or an Earth Day celebration, or if there's a school garden in an elementary school, you put the conservation district in those spaces where there might be some overlap, and you start the conversations and you see, oh yeah, the parent at that school works for this company and now they want to have their employees have a volunteer day in the field and my producer needs help on this planting. It's just a domino effect of once the conversations and ideas start flowing, and then the grant opportunities can arise from there. Meanwhile, you can still keep an eye out on state and federal funding and make sure you're not missing any deadlines on those larger grants, but kind of having a dual pronged strategy where you're going after both at the same time. And I guess lastly, I just want this to sound accessible and available for you all, because this is all the work that we're already doing on the ground. We just have some different words for how we describe it, or maybe we want to work together to amplify the effect of it. None of us want to reinvent the wheel. So talking to our neighbors and going after things together and collaboratively can be the most efficient way to do this.
I love that. And I think I'll just put in a plug for the NCDEA has some really good resources on your local work group process, right? The locally led conservation process is exactly what Rachel just described. And there are 1,000 ways to do it, and none of them are wrong. You're collecting that information, you're talking to all of those people, and that's helping guide the operations in your district. So we have some really great resources on our website for that. We also last year did a webinar on strategic planning. Craig Nelson from the state of Washington. He is a conservation district manager there. He joined us with a fantastic step-by-step. You have nothing to get to a strategic plan or an annual operating plan or whatever you want to call it. So there's some good resources out there if you don't have that, or if you're looking to expand on it. I think there's some really great things out there, but it's definitely the foundation to move forward with a lot of projects and programs within the district, is really sitting down and talking about what are the needs that are out there? What do we see? What do our partners see? What are new partners we can work with? So I love that, Rachel.
A couple things that I thought of. Number one, when you're writing your grants, if it's a non-conservation based funder, make sure you run your application past the eyes of somebody who does not live in our world. Because sometimes when we say things and we think things and it makes total sense to us, but somebody who does not live in our world, it may be a little cloudy. So run those applications past somebody who really doesn't live in our world and sits outside of it, just to make sure that what we're writing is clear, and what we're asking is understandable. Just again, another pro tip out there, run it through somebody who doesn't live in our world. Yeah, there was a second thing, and I don't remember what it was. It had to do with what Sarah just said, but I know what it was. Strategic planning resources. Ask around the districts. Maybe check with your state employees association if you have one. See if there's a facilitator that people use, or somebody who's willing to come facilitate if you don't feel comfortable doing that. Or check with your state ag agency. They may have somebody that would be happy to come out and facilitate a strategic planning meeting with you and your board. That way it doesn't fall all on you, and you can actually sit and be a participant instead of being the leader. So, and a lot of times you'll get those for free. People are happy to come facilitate those, and you don't have to spend any money to do it. But, and then that's somebody that's kind of out of the board setting and can be a little bit more objective. And, if you have a supervisor or a commissioner or whatever you call them that tends to dominate conversations, they can put them at bay a little easier than what you can as staff. So again, just a couple of quick points on looking at strategic planning.
Yeah, good points, Eric. Thank you. Okay, last chance for questions in the Q&A box. And while y'all are thinking, I will just say that this recording will be posted. And Rachel, if you're willing to share your PowerPoint with me, we'll post that as well so folks can look at that. I know you had some links in there, Rachel, that folks were trying to furiously copy down. So we will put those up on our website here in the next couple of days. We also post them to our YouTube channel. And then, as always, our next month's webinars will be posted, and with the registration link on the website, as well as an email. We've started hopefully building up our email list. So if you're not on it and you got this some other way, please go to the website and sign up for the email list. We send out information periodically on things that are going on, programs, services, and of course these professional development offerings through NCDEA. So we'd love to have you join us. Like Eric said, there's a lot of information to be shared. Our regional directors are fantastic at making those connections. If you're unsure of, I really would love to start something, they can help connect you with people across the country that can, provide resources or know someone. It's really a small world out there, quite honestly. So please reach out and visit with us. And Eric and Rachel, I'll let you have the last word if there's anything you want to kind of close out with.
I just want to say thank you to everyone. We had a great showing up, especially Colorado, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Missouri seem well represented in the chat at least. And thank you just to everyone. My email is in there. I'll put it again in the PowerPoint and you'll see it. I'm really open to taking any calls or emails to talk about what a regional collaboration could look like in your area, because what we're doing here with the California regions is really a template to see what's working and what isn't working, and we're here to share both perspectives with you. So feel free to reach out.
Great.
Ditto. No, I'm just kidding. I do echo everything that Rachel just said. But I just want to kind of also echo what Sarah said. Make sure that you're checking out the NCDEA website and also share what you've learned today with your friends. Get the word out that we're doing these and encourage other district employees close to you to take advantage of these webinars, or at least make them aware that they're happening. Even in today's communication rich world, we struggle to get the word out. So, please take a moment to share what you've learned today with your friends and colleagues and encourage them to either go to the website and watch it on the library or sign up for the next one. So, but thank you all for being here today. We appreciate all of the attendees, and hopefully you're walking away with a little gleam of new knowledge that we were able to help you with.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you all so much. And we will see you same time, same place next month. Have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Thank you.